All right, we are live with Alexander McCurse in London. Alexander, how are you doing today?
Very well indeed. It's good to be back in London. I mean, it was a very interesting trip in around the North London countryside that I was on over the weekend, but in some ways a rather concerning one too. So it's back, good to be back. And of course, the weather is typical English weather, London weather, wet, more rain, still more rain, mist, cold, winds, all that. I wish I wasn't. It's nicer to be in Cyprus now, if I have to say.
Yes, Cyprus does have the best weather, but did you happen to catch Zelensky, Stammer, Merz, Macron? Did you sit in on the meeting? Did they invite you to discuss the new
I,
peace plan that they're cooking up, or what?
Unfortunately, not. I don't know why. I was overlooked for some reason.
Yeah, all right. We'll talk about all of that. So before we get started, quick hello to everyone that is watching us on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on Rumble, YouTube, and the Duran.locals.com. Yep, Duran.locals.com is up and running. The chat is working. Super. And thank you to our moderators on YouTube. Harry is in the house. I believe Zariel was somewhere in the chat as well, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you to our moderators on YouTube. Alexander, let's get into the news. What do you think is the big news story? We've got a little bit of Trump's brokered ceasefires collapsing, Cambodia and Thailand.
Yes,
That's happening. We
yes.
have Zelensky in London. He's now on his way to Brussels to meet with Rutte and Ursula. He was just in London, which we just mentioned. We have Trump saying he's disappointed with the Green Goblin. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the most important thing to understand, and by far the most important event that's about to happen, is that Siversky, it seems, is about to fall. I mean, we have all of this charade, all this theatre that's taking place in London, and I can sum it up very easily in ways that everybody who's been worked in business should understand. When somebody makes an offer when you make an offer to someone, and they make a counter offer, that means they have rejected your offer. And that's what has been happening over the last couple of days. Zelensky and the Europeans have rejected Trump's offer. And there should be no doubt about this. We're going to get all the usual rhetoric over the next couple of days when some kind of new offer is cobbled together, when some new idea is cobbled together by the Europeans and Zelensky, which will be the old idea. It'll be the Kellogg freeze plan all over again. And as you absolutely rightly said, make no mistake about it, Trump's own plan, or the plan that Witkoff and Kushner came up with, was some ideas from Istanbul Plus folded in to Kellogg's freeze plan. They weren't really that different. But what we're going to get again is Kellogg's freeze plan by another name, but it will be exactly the same, the identical proposal that the Russians have rejected time and time again. So the really important news is not this diplomacy, which is going nowhere and will never go anywhere because the Europeans don't want it to. It is the fact that Siversky is about to fall. We've had the strategic review, which might be colossally important, but we don't know that yet because at the moment, all we have is a document, and it's a very interesting document, but we don't know whether it is the trend. It represents the trend that's going to assert itself in the United States. I think there's a chance that it will, though not immediately. And it's interesting that these ideas have been put out there. And of course, we have the zany plans that are circulating around Brussels. The reason Zelensky is going to Brussels is because he wants money. The Europeans are keen to give him money. They're keen to give him someone else's money, which is Russia's. And what they don't, I think, understand about this is that the Russians want them to steal that money, because of course the Russians know perfectly well that if that happens, two things will happen. Firstly, negotiations, the whole process of negotiations, which they've never been keen on in the first place, will fold. There'll be more tensions between the Europeans and the Americans. And I think it's fair to say many Americans beyond Trump are unhappy about this idea. And of course, it could fold, crash the financial system in Europe as well. And if that does indeed happen and it accelerates the BRICS for the Russians, that is icing on the cake. Just to say.
The Russians want them to take that money.
Yeah.
Yeah. The lawsuits will come, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
They're now looking at Plan B, as Belgium is digging in, which is to give this reparations loan, but to have it be backstopped by all of the EU member states, or at least the EU member states that are willing to participate in loaning money or backstopping the loaning of money to Ukraine, which would be in the form of collective debt Euro bonds.
Yes,
basically. So that's the Plan B, of which Germany and France would be on the hook big time. Keep in mind also, Alexander, which no one wants to talk about. A part of this money, this 210 billion or 225 billion, a part of the money, 40 billion of that money, is to repay a previous loan of 40 billion taken from the G7 that was given to Ukraine that has vanished.
Yep.
No one talks about that.
I mean, I have to say, as frauds go, this one is really elegant. I mean, it is really beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful Ponzi schemes ever put together. I mean, it really is, actually. I mean, it works its magic every day. And you must imagine also how many people are really happy. And, when Donald Trump Jr. talked about the Bugattis, which, by the way, are very interesting cars. I've always been interested in cars and their technological marvels. Well, they're keeping the people, the engineers at Bugatti very, very busy. It shows that in Europe, we can still make things. We make about 250 of those in total, by the way, at any particular run. So just think how many of them are going to Ukraine and how many of these Ukrainians are keeping all of these engineers in their jobs. And all thanks to the European Union. Who says that they don't support European industry? This is an interesting way of doing it, but that's exactly how it's going about. The very high-end part of European industry, but still.
They're going to get that money to Zelensky.
Of course they are.
About it.
Of course they are. One way
they always find a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course they are. Absolutely they are. And make no mistake, putting that up, human irony aside, those of us who live in Europe are going to pay for this, just as we're paying for everything else. I mean, it's Starmer in London opened up a interactive thing on the internet, and interestingly enough, more and more people were rushing onto it and asking him, why exactly are we giving money to Ukraine now when we can't afford the basic things here? And it was interesting that those questions are starting to be asked. And this is in Britain. So in Germany, where things are more open, and in France, I'm sure they'll be asking it even more.
Yeah. Europeans, UK citizens, we're gonna pay for this, no doubt about it. And countries are going to run into deep financial difficulties with these loans.
Yeah.
And it's not going to happen immediately.
No.
It's going to happen in 1, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yes.
And the European elite and the globalists, they're going to blame the citizens on top of it.
Yes.
They're going to say, well, our economy's bust because, we didn't do this and we didn't do that. So now we have to go to the IMF, and now we have to go to the World Bank, and we have to impose austerity. And no one is going to say that the reason for all of this collapse is because they just kept on giving tens of billions, of hundreds of billions to Ukraine, which is unaudited and which has just gone down the golden toilet.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see this already. I mean, they're blaming welfare systems. Now, you can argue about whether spending money on welfare systems is always a good thing, or whether the welfare systems are well run. But welfare systems at least keep money inside the country. What we have with this is a constant external bleed. It's money that is going continuously all the time out of Europe to someone else who of course then does funnel part of it back, but even that part which comes back goes into all of these interesting places in Dubai, in, in the other Gulf states, in the various interesting and rather beautiful islands in the Caribbean and the islands around the coast of Britain, in all of these sort of places. So this is an absolute loss. And this is, I think, something that people in Europe need to understand. So it's not the same as spending money on social security. However, much you may feel that social security needs reform. Arguably, at least in Britain, I would say it does. Definitely, it does in France. But this is money, social security money, stays in the country. Money that is given out in this way goes outside and never returns.
So why is Seversk so important? We've been saying for a while now, for many, many years on this channel, you've been saying it for many, many years, that it is the situation on the front lines, it's the military situation which drives everything. The only reason that the United States is trying to broker some sort of a freeze, they call it a peace. I believe it's more of a freeze. The only reason that you see Europe scrambling and Zelensky traveling all the time to various capitals around the collective West is because of the situation on the front line, and because it cannot be hidden anymore.
No.
The past couple of years, they were able to hide it, the
Yes.
situation on the front line, because it's easy to hide attrition.
Yes.
It's very difficult to hide territorial loss.
Exactly. Now, Siversky is important because it's a major fortified position in northern Donbass. It's the bone in Russia's throat, or at least the Russian military's throat, in the north of Donbass. If the Russians capture it, which they're about to, then it opens the way for the encirclement from the northern end of the Slavyansk Kramatorsk fortified line. And even the Institute for the Study of War has now admitted the importance of that fortified line. They're going to try to walk it back, by the way. When it starts to crumble, they'll say, well, actually, its importance has been overstated. It has not been overstated. If Slavyansk Kramatorsk, the line of cities that are Ukraine's Great Wall, finally fall, which they will, and sooner than many people are saying, then Ukraine opens up. Aggressive attrition has done its work, and the way is open to the Dnieper, and arguably beyond the Dnieper, if the Russians choose to go beyond the Dnieper. Which, but by the way, if there's no real sign of negotiations, and there won't be, then they will. They will go beyond the Dnieper, because the thing people don't understand is that it's not just NATO. It's not just agreeing that Ukraine cannot join NATO. It's not just a territorial issue. There are all sorts of other things in the original objectives set out by Putin at the start of the special military operation: demilitarization, denuclearization, denazification, all of those things, which Ukraine has to agree to for the special military operation to end. And if Ukraine doesn't agree to those things, then the Russians have no option, according to their own policy, but to cross the Dnieper in order to effectively change the government structures in Kiev to make those things possible. And if the Russians cross the Dnieper and start occupying not just Kherson region, but Nikolaev region, Odessa region, they are never giving those places up. No possibility of it. The Russian army reaches Odessa. It would be problematic for Putin to end the war without taking Odessa. We've discussed this many times, but it is absolutely inconceivable that having taken Odessa, the Russians would give it back, or give it up. I mean, that possibility does not exist. It would be like the Americans giving up New York. It's just not going to happen.
So the theater behind the diplomacy, the United States being the neutral mediator,
Oh.
The narrative that they have to convince Zelensky to go along with their 28-point peace plan, which now Zelensky and Macron claim is 20 points now. So it's 28, it's 19, it's 27. Now it's back down to 20, according to Zelensky and Macron. And they're going to give this to the Americans, right? Zelensky said that they've removed a lot of the points that were not favorable to Ukraine, and now they're going to pass it off to the Americans so they can continue to negotiate this peace plan. The United States, it controls Ukraine from top to bottom.
Absolutely.
Controls Kiev, has a huge footprint in Kiev. The U.S. government, the intel agencies, the bureaucracy of the United States has a massive footprint in Kiev, in Ukraine. They run the military operation from Germany. The New York Times exposed that a year ago. But they fund Ukraine. They fund NATO. They fund the European Union. They control the European Union pretty much. But for some reason, they have to figure out a way to convince Zelensky and convince the Europeans.
Yeah.
So the theater of all of this, what's behind it?
This is something I think a lot of people don't understand, because, but it's to those of us who have lived through, the twists and turns of American policy. This is not so surprising. The United States enters into wars, establishes governments, takes over a country, runs its economy, runs its governmental institutions, and then finds it almost impossible to disengage, and has to go through the pretense that it's got to consult and accept and defer to the leadership of that country, the leadership which it itself appoints and runs. And people ask, how can that be? Why doesn't the United States just switch it off? That this was true in Vietnam. I remember the debates in Vietnam when the South Vietnamese government, the President Thieu, behaved exactly in the same way that Zelensky is. They were complaining bitterly about the American moves to negotiate with the North Vietnamese, and we're talking about betrayal. And if you go back, you can find all the old videos from that time. I think some of them are still on YouTube. You can find open speeches that South Vietnamese officials used to make in the public presence of US officials, excoriating them. And there's just obviously the biting the hand that feeds you. And you ask, why does the United States do that? Why does it accept this? Well, the answer is because the United States has the most complicated government in the world, and most parts of the American government never want to negotiate peace. They are structured to continue. When we said that they have no reverse gear, we said it for a reason, because from the point of view of all of these entities within the US government, the military industrial complex, the intelligence communities, the people in the Senate who are always for taking the hardest possible line, not only does it go against their worldview that the United States ever retreats. That's one. Their own material and political interests dictate that it always advances. That, by the way, is a structural reality of empires. And it's one reason why empires find it very difficult to consolidate and to make decisions. The best analysis of this was provided by Paul Kennedy, Robert Barnes's mentor, back in the 80s. Why Empires Fall. Go to that book. You'll find it all there. There is nothing new under the sun, and there is nothing different about this with the United States. So why don't they just turn off Zelensky? Why don't they just tell this impossible man, go?
Which they could.
Which
They have the
could.
power. There's
They
no
have
doubt
the
about it. They have
they
that
have the
power.
power to do it. Why
Also for
don't
the
they?
Europeans, for both
Why don't they
Zelensky and the
just?
Europeans.
Why don't they just tell Zelensky and well, sorry, not just Zelensky, but Ursula and Starmer and all of these people, get stuffed. We've had enough. Then enough's enough. You are going to accept this thing. The reason is that for every official in the United States who wants that, there are 10 others who oppose it, and they're whispering and in contact continuously with the people in London, in Paris, in Brussels, in Berlin, telling them, stand firm, wreck this proposal in any way you can. The 20-point plan, which the Europeans and Zelensky have come up with, has been drafted, I am guessing, and this is a informed guess now, it's been mostly drafted in Washington by people who want to wreck this program, this peace proposal. I mean, they're all busy on the phone, and they're negotiating with the Europeans behind Trump's back.
They're negotiating with themselves.
Of course,
the United States is negotiating with the United States
exactly.
in order to figure out a way to either get out of this mess or to keep the conflict going. I mean,
Yes.
that's what it is.
Yes.
The U.S. is negotiating with the U.S. Yeah, you have the
Yes.
Europeans there. You have Macron, you have Starmer, you have Merz, you have Zelensky traveling around.
Yes.
But effectively, what you're saying is that what we're looking at right now with Trump, with the 28-point peace plan, with this new 20-point peace plan, is the United States negotiating with the United States, different parts of the U.S. negotiating.
Absolutely. And you can see this. I mean, Trump is going around telling everybody, look, I'm going to stop any funding for Ukraine. No more money from the United States to Ukraine. What does the Senate do? What does Congress do? They've just authorized another $800 million for Ukraine.
A day after Trump Jr. talks about Bugattis in Monaco, you get 800 million to Ukraine.
Exactly. And I mean, what does Trump now do? Does he veto this? Get himself into a conflict with the Congress over this? Perhaps he will, perhaps he should, but we all know that there are enough votes in Congress to override his veto. And if he does that, he will burn up political capital in Congress, which he probably needs for other things. So after all the talk about Bugattis and all of that, the money will keep flowing. Now, we have to talk about these things because, of course, Trump is an important political phenomenon, and there is a real possibility, at least a chance, that the United States might change because there is resistance, growing resistance from below, which goes deeper in some respects than the resistance that we saw over the war in Vietnam, for example. It's different and it's deeper. And of course, it doesn't have the theater, the big protests and all of that. But there is, I sense, a change happening amongst the American people. And, we have to look at the surface things. But in the meantime, it's very, very difficult for Donald Trump to impose his policy, even assuming that he had his own clear mind about how to do it.
Right. That's assuming that he has a clear mind and does want peace as to how to go about this. Okay. Understood. Before we get to questions, Alexander, any comments about Cambodia and Thailand? What's going on there? Even CNN, I was reading an article this morning from CNN where they asked the question, what is causing this conflict? Why is this happening? And CNN said, we don't, they actually said, we have no idea.
Well,
that's what CNN said.
Indeed.
We have no idea.
As I understand it, it is mostly Cambodia that is now attacking Thailand. Now, I'm not going to get into the history of this dispute, which I don't pretend to know very well. And I understand that there is a strong, Cambodia may have a case that Thailand might be occupying territory, which historically was part of Cambodia, but I might be wrong about that. And if I am, please apologies. But the push for these attacks comes from Cambodia. Now, if you know anything about Southeast Asia, which I know a little about because of the history before the Vietnam War and all that, Cambodia is very small, it's very poor. Thailand dwarfs Cambodia. So for a small country to attack a big country, somebody is putting them up to do it. And who is that somebody? Well, I don't know exactly, but I suspect that person's address is in Washington. You have to look again back at Washington. The very fact that Trump said that he'd brokered a ceasefire um, and boasted about the fact that he had brokered a ceasefire probably has incentivized someone in Washington to arrange for it to be broken, because again, it puts Trump in a difficult position or in an embarrassing position.
These are not peace deals that Trump has brokered. These 9 or 10 or 8 deals that he talks about that should get him the
Yes,
Nobel Peace Prize.
yes,
These are pauses.
these are
He
pauses.
brokers pauses, and he doesn't get to the root
No.
causes, as Russia always talks about.
Yes.
In any of the conflicts that he talks about, some of them he mixes up as well, right? He doesn't even get the conflicts correct, but it doesn't matter. He's not getting to the root
No.
causes, and these are not real conflict resolutions.
No, absolutely not. And of course, he's misunderstanding, if he's ever understood it, his own, what everybody assumed was his policy. His policy was not brokering peace deals all around the world. Brokering peace deals all around the world is the United States involving itself in the disputes and arguments and foreign policies and ultimately domestic policies of other countries. His policy was supposed to be America first, focusing on the United States. If Cambodia and Thailand have a dispute and go to war about it, that should not concern the United States. And Trump, pretending to himself that he's brokered a peace deal, all it is going to do is open him up for embarrassment. And if he's not very, very careful, it will again distract him and trap him in complex discussions over a topic that doesn't interest him and he doesn't understand, over a border dispute of countries far, far away from the United States, of absolutely no interest to his base. So this, he doesn't understand the importance of being laser focused on those things that really matter, which are things domestic to the United States.
Yeah, and we've made the case many times that the United States probably doesn't have the capability, that the people, to actually put together complex peace negotiations and peace
Correct.
deals.
Correct.
They can do ceasefires, but this is not,
No,
10, 20 points on a piece of paper and then just having the two leaders shake their hands.
no.
There's a lot more to this that meets the eye, and the United States probably doesn't have at this point in
No.
time the diplomats that can do these things.
Well, because it doesn't have diplomats. It's got neocons. I mean, it's a complete. This is a completely different thing. They may call themselves diplomats, but this is where, by the way, the disclosures from WikiLeaks were very, very interesting, because they went through a lot of the document. They provided a lot of the document dumps. You remember all the embassy papers, and we saw how these people actually behave. They don't do diplomacy. That's not what they're about. They're very aggressive in their interactions with the people of other countries, and they always pursue this neocon interests, which are not really consistent with diplomacy or with achieving peace. But again, I ask the question: why is it the job of the United States anyway to try to broker a peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia? I mean, I just don't think, from a strictly American point of view, it makes sense. If anybody should be doing it, it should be the UN or ASEAN. These are both countries that are members of ASEAN, I believe. So let them sort it out, not the United States.
Yeah, well, they've somehow convinced themselves, or they've created this perception, this marketing perception that we're going to position Trump, or create a Trump that is the peace negotiator, and we're just
Yeah.
going to stack peace deal after peace deal, and that's the perception that we want to put out there.
and
And
it
this is what they've
feeds
agreed to. I don't know.
exactly,
Trump's
and it
Susie
feeds
Wiles. I don't. This is what they've
exactly.
come up with.
And it feeds Trump's vanity to do that. I wonder whether this was a trap, actually, whether it was put together by people who are basically hostile to Trump's agenda in order to involve him and to bog him down in these external things, because ultimately it makes no sense
It's
at
a
all.
yeah,
It's a distraction. I
distraction
mean, he has
from
no
dealing with everything that the United States needs to deal with. Yeah.
exactly, and which he was elected to deal with, which is completely different.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to questions. Is there anything else that
Absolutely.
you want to discuss before
No,
we get to questions?
I
Yeah.
mean, lots going on. I mean, in Britain, more intrigues today. As I said, this portal that Starmer put up has been a disastrous thing, and of course, he seems determined to infect himself with the Zelensky curse. He's again hugging Zelensky outside Downing Street. This is after all the revelations about what's been going on in Kiev. And by the way, just a quick one thing I will say: the royal family, the king and the queen, also now embracing Zelensky. I mean,
Don't they
utter
have
folly.
consultants who are
Well, I
telling them that this guy is toxic, that you
yeah,
guys hugging this guy is really really bad, especially now after this corruption scandal? Stay as far away from him as possible, or that they just don't care, which is
we
what I
know
believe it is. They just don't care.
they just
Let the
don't get what.
people complain. You know what?
No,
Put this portal up, or create a TikTok page. Let the people vent. Let the people make fun of you, Kier. Right? Let them mock you. We don't care. Let them get
absolutely.
out their frustration. We're going to do what we're going to do, and just let everybody else get on social media and just unload on Keir Starmer, and we're just going to
Yeah.
continue to escalate and give money to Zelensky, and pour the GBP into the washing machine.
Well,
I think
absolutely.
that's what they're doing.
The king's mother, Elizabeth II, would never have done this, and I can say this with absolute confidence. I mean, she was always very careful not to involve herself in these things. See, the trouble with the king is that, of course, he's a man with very conventional opinions, to put it mildly, and he's following his advice from ministers. Um, the Queen, the old Queen, would have said, "No, I'm not doing this. I think this is an extremely bad idea for me to become directly involved in this way." I mean, by the way, she didn't like Russia very much. It was widely known. Her husband, Philip, was an intense Russophile, as is well known. Remember, he was Greek and came from an Orthodox background. But she was not, obviously. But nonetheless, she would have understood completely how unwise this was,
All right,
especially with all the corruption scandals swirling around. But the king and now the queen, our current king and queen, are going out of their way to give the Green Goblin as much support as they can.
yeah, small corruption scandals to distract away from the really really big ones.
Absolutely, yeah.
From F. Fitz, I fear a fake banner assault here in Ireland. There was a joke, 4 Russian drones buzzing Zelensky's plane when Witkoff was here. Now a shadow tanker in the Irish Sea. The EU wants 4.5 billion from us to guarantee Euroclear. Will
Yes.
still will we still be neutral, by the way?
No, I mean, again, if you're starting to give money in this kind of way, then you're not neutral. I mean, you are funding someone else's war. I mean, neutrality is neutrality between the superpowers, and you are siding with one side against another. I mean, in practical terms, you could have an opinion about a war, but if you're starting to involve yourself directly in it in this way by providing funding, then you are not.
Yeah. And the drones? The
The
drones are about
drones,
keeping Russia as an enemy, right? Hybrid
exactly,
attacks and
exactly.
hybrid wars. I mean, Russian drones all the way in Ireland. I mean,
Oh, well, exactly. I mean, it's absurd.
it's
The idea
absurd.
is ridiculous. And, we have all of these drones, all these stories about drones, and we haven't actually managed to bring down a single one or produce a single one. Do they even
Right.
exist? Do they actually
Yeah.
exist?
Yeah. They can't bring down one drone so we can see it.
Yeah.
right? I mean, we want to see it because it's going to
Mm.
say made in Russia, made by Putin.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If they manage to show us one, right?
Yes,
So yeah,
exactly.
they go on with the drone thing because the plan is 2030. Well, the U.S. wants them to be ready by 2027, but the Europeans are saying no, no, no. We'll be ready
Exactly.
for conflict with Russia by 2030. So they have to keep the Russian hybrid attacks, this
Yeah.
hybrid attack story going and going, and the drones are an easy way for them to do it.
Exactly.
And it's a pain in the ass for people. I mean, let's
Of
face
course it
you
is.
go to the airport and your flight's delayed for 4 hours, and then CNN or the Telegraph or whatever puts out a story and says Putin sent those drones over the Berlin airport, and you say, "Damn it, that Putin! Now my
Well,
flight's delayed for 4 hours."
that's exactly what the purpose of this is.
Yeah. All right, from Danielle, the new U.S. doctrine, is it the Wolfowitz doctrine rebranded?
Well, there are strong elements in it of the Wolfowitz doctrine. And the Wolfowitz doctrine said that the United States must pursue global world domination. That was one. By the way, it's never been made public exactly what the doctrine said, but what we know about it, the United States should aim for world domination, should prevent a new center of power emerging in Eurasia to replace the Soviet Union. And that basically means prevent any Russian resurgence and disallow any other alternative center of power to appear that might challenge the United States. So that was the Wolfowitz doctrine. And by the way, it's a sacred article of faith for the neocons, and it's a guiding doctrine within the State Department. Now, what this does is it says we're not interested in pursuing global domination anymore because we don't have the resources to do that. We want a better relationship of some kind with the Russians, but we still won't allow any other country, any other great power to become stronger than us. So you can see that it's moving away from the Wolfowitz doctrine, but it isn't ditching it entirely.
Commander Crossfire says the new U.S. doctrine is the old U.S. doctrine. Administration might change, parties might shift, and kids grow into voters, but war never changes.
Well, can I just say something about this? I think people are over. First of all, there is a difference about this document. It's not the same. It is different, but it is only a document. What the American government does and what it writes might be completely different things. Elbridge Colby and people like him have penned together a document in which they say no more global domination. We're going to focus on defending the Western Hemisphere, which means in effect we're going to run Latin America as our sphere of influence and prevent anybody else from coming in. We want to stabilize relations with Russia. We want to exit Europe in some form. And this is a big change. I mean, people who argue that it is not are clearly wrong. I mean, the previous policies of the United States were fervidly Atlanticist, based around NATO and the alliance with the Europeans and the concept of the collective West. So all of these things in this document are a major change. But will they happen? That is the really important question, not what Elbridge Colby and his team put together in this document, but whether they will actually move forward and achieve this. Just saying.
But it's a different type of empire, which we discussed in our
Absolutely.
video, which Brian also discusses in detail, Brian Berletic, where it is a division of labor and outsourcing. So
Yeah.
instead of the United States, as
Yeah.
the document says, being Atlas and holding up the entire world, what they're looking to do in this document is to outsource the responsibility.
Exactly.
And they're telling the Europeans, get your act together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get your act together and start taking on your problems, which is Russia. Start dealing with Russia on your own.
On your own.
We'll be there. We'll be there to
Yeah.
sell you the weapons, of course.
Yes.
But you guys need to do it. So it is an outsourcing of empire in a way.
It is indeed. But as we also discussed in our program, which appeared yesterday on the Duran, when empires do this, it's a sign of that they're fading, that they are in retreat. We talked at length yesterday in our program about Joseph Chamberlain, and this is a good example. But perhaps a more vivid example, if you like, is a letter that the Roman emperor sent to the British cities in 400 AD, when he said, "From this point on, I am withdrawing the Roman army from Britain. You must take care of your own defense. You are still part of the empire, but the empire itself won't protect you. You must do that." And that was, in practice, the end of Roman rule in Britain.
Nigel Green says, good morning, the lads. Good morning, Nigel.
Morning.
Matthew says, I don't understand the EU. They want to go to war by 2030, but have no means of doing it. Even if they did, that would be suicidal. What will they do?
Well, what they're trying to do, and what this is all about, is reversing or all of these policies, all of this language, all these ideas that are coming out of the United States. They want to keep the conflict with the Russians going so that they can come and tell the Americans, look, we've done everything we possibly can. We've increased our defense spending to 20% of GDP. But the fact is, we can't take on the bear by ourselves. The bear is on the prowl. We need you to stay. And that's that now, I think, is the pretty much open text behind what they're doing. This document, whatever else it's done, it has totally spooked them. And, I'm not somebody I'm plugged into Whitehall, as I once used to be, by the way. But I know the signals, and I know what people in London are saying. And they are furious about this, and they are frightened. And that is driving them now even further down this rabbit hole of supporting Zelensky, throwing money at him, and telling the Americans, look, you can't leave. You can't abandon us now. If you do, the Russians will take over.
Yeah, we're going to lose our money, is what they're saying. Daggett to 1234 says, why are Europeans constantly getting the blame when they are ruled by hand-picked puppets by the US? I've never gotten so much leverage out of good Tsar, bad boyars, saying as with this admin.
Well, this is true, of course. I mean, ultimately, this is the other great problem with this document, the strategic security document, which is, of course, it blames everything on everybody else. It never, well, it does to some extent criticize previous administrations, but it doesn't honestly face the fact that all of these problems around the world that the current administration has to contend with are problems that originate from US policies. It continues to assume that the United States throughout this time may have been wrong, it may have been misguided in all the things that it did, but it always acted from the best of intentions. And it was all of these bad people around the world who didn't understand how good America's intentions really were. And they criticized the Europeans justly. Every single word of criticism about the present setup in Europe that this document made, I agree with, by the way. Everything, the policies, the security policies, the economic policies, the censorship, the authoritarianism, but nowhere does it admit that this is a structure that the United States itself created and which was fervently supported by the Biden administration only a year ago.
That's why it's good to have vassals.
Yeah,
get yourself some vassals, because if things go well, you can take the credit, and if things go bad, you can blame it on the vassals. That's what it is. Salimula says, for Europe, how to fix the immigration situation?
Well, it's very simple. You do away with the European Union, take control of your borders, and actually enforce border controls. But of course, the European Union won't let you do that because, of course, they say that free movement and all that are sacred principles that the European Union must follow.
Right.
Dominic Cummings in the Brexit referendum, what did he say? Take back control. Of course, we haven't done that here, not remotely, but that's the first thing you have to do.
Yeah. George Vasilchenko says, question off topic. Since you guys are both Greek and great, can you for once speak a sentence in Greek to each other? We do it often.
We do it often. Yeah.
Ευχαριστώ, Yorgo. All right. Geo Stone says, either of you worried about EU digital censorship?
Absolutely. Of course we are. So should everybody be, by the way.
Everyone, yeah. Commander Crossfire says, just to point out how absurd these days are, Russia sends NASA astronauts to space while Washington oversees the mass fratricide in Russia.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is of course absolutely true. I would say that in and of itself, this is not unprecedented. So in the 1960s, the US and the Soviet Union pursued policies of détente, even though the Soviets were supporting North Vietnam. And their support for North Vietnam was very, very extensive and included providing North Vietnam with an advanced air defense system, which was shooting down and killing American pilots, just to say.
West Wolf Esquire says, does the West comprehend at all about the Ukraine conflict is an ideological issue for Russia? Georgia can't join NATO, Moldova, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. No NATO. Serbia, not that it would want to join NATO.
They don't understand it. And I don't think Trump, by the way, fully understands it either. I think he thinks that this is something where he can just sort out a deal, and that he's a little baffled by the Russians haven't accepted some of the economic offers that he's made to them. But you're absolutely right. For the Russians, this is indeed an ideological, existential question. And that ultimately determines everything they say and do and will do about this conflict.
R.W. Aswal says, Stammer let the cat out of the bag with the just and lasting ceasefire. That's in quotes. MSM missed the failure to call for peace. It was absurd from Stammer, as just implies settlement and lasting implies permanence.
Yes, absolutely. You're completely correct. His use of words, and remember, he's a lawyer. So lawyers are expected to use their word, pick their words carefully. But he spoke about a just and lasting ceasefire. He did not talk about a just and lasting peace. And there's a major distinction. That tells you that what he wants to do and what the British government wants to do is freeze the conflict. And I mean, it could not be more straightforward and more open. And of course, he's still talking about deploying British troops to Ukraine.
Commander Crossfire says, I wonder what the U.S. World War II vets would think of Japan's rearmament under Washington's dictates. How many boys, American boys, never made it home? Have they no shame?
Well, indeed. But I mean, you could argue also, and by the way, this to some extent applies to the Russians as well. What about all of those people who went to fight Al-Qaeda and saw an official of Al-Qaeda, a current official of Al-Qaeda, received in Washington and embraced by people there, the new president of Syria? And by the way, just to say, a whole huge upswing of commentary has appeared all over the media here in London over the last couple of days, saying that Syria is spiraling down and is going down into civil war again. And even maps have started to appear, which show the actual extent of the territory that Jolani really controls. And it's about 20% of Syria, from what I can see.
Yeah, he doesn't control much. You also said that also applies to Russia as well. The Al-Jolani.
Yes. I mean, Putin received Jolani as well. I have to say, it made me choke. And I know a lot of people in Russia didn't like it either.
Yeah. Arcane Eclectic said, Merry Christmas, gents, and our Duran community. Thank you.
And Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Decibel Volvo, just super chat. Thank you for that. West Wolf says, ANA, how far are we from a situation where if the US takes unfriendly economic action against China, Russia, or India, the three take collective action against the United States?
If you're talking about the Russians and the Chinese, I think to a great extent we are there already, even though they don't talk about it much in public. But the United States, for example, has taken steps to try to get China to restrict oil imports from Russia. The Chinese are not doing that. So, I mean, they are supporting the Russian economy in that way. And the Russians, for their part, um, are making sure that China continues to get discounted oil and also gets, food supplies, and all of that is being built up. So this is developing and it's increasing. And by the way, this review that we've been talking about complained about the German companies are opening up in China and are getting cheap energy from Russia in China so that they can continue to compete at an advantage against American companies. It was a very interesting comment, by the way, thrown in. But anyway, India, because of its prickly relationship with China and its sense that it must maintain some kind of hedge through good relations with the United States, is much more wary about doing that. So Putin went to India, huge number of economic deals done, every indication that India and Russia are the best of friends, which I've no doubt that they are, but no announcements of big defense deals, which everybody had been expecting, including myself. So nothing about the Sukhoi 57, nothing about the S-400. Now, I understand that those deals have already been agreed, but probably the Indians said, we can't sign them now in a over the course of a trip like this, because if we did that, that would be telling the Americans that we're siding with the Russians against you. So the Indians with India, they're still quite a long way from doing that.
Socier says, what happens to Ukraine's debts if it is completely subsumed by Russia?
Oh, they will roll them over, and they will say that Ukraine has still got a government. Of course, that government may be based in Nice, for example, or Saint Moritz, or one of these nice places. So I mean, we must continue to fund it. And as for the big debts, well, we can go on rolling them over, and ultimately, it is the Russians who must pay. That is the beauty of reparations. So when this terrible man, Mr. Putin, goes, and when there's the revolution in Russia, and when we get Mr. Yeltsin to take over in Moscow, we will come along and we will say, please pay off all of these debts that you owe us for all the money that we spent on on defending Ukraine from your country's aggression. And since, of course, you can't pay these debts now, give us all your oil fields, give us all your gas fields, and do that kind of thing. That's the agenda that's going to be followed.
Exactly. While they keep on funding the government in exile
Exactly.
from the European, from printing money, or from the European taxpayer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the plan. From 1 second, from Nickelball, who will eventually live in those empty lands in Ukraine?
Well, that's a good question, and I mean, it is a human law that if there are empty lands, they will be filled. Now, a lot of the people who've left these places will return, and are already doing so, by the way. I mean, the Ukrainian government is very annoyed about the fact that a lot of the people who lived in Mariupol have returned to Mariupol, for example, which is being rebuilt, and which is, by the way, by far the biggest city that the Russians have so far captured in Ukraine. So a lot of the people will return, but eventually other people from Russia will move in. These are rich lands. I mean, agriculturally, this territory is extremely rich. So, and yes, birth rates there have collapsed for many, many years. They were depopulating already long before the war started. But I mean, there are opportunities. There will be opportunities for people. People will be found to take them, and many of them will come from Russia. Some of them may come from other places. Just saying.
Games of Chairs says this war won't end until Russian troops are stood on the Polish border.
Well, you might get your
Probably.
wish. Yeah, probably.
RW Swell says we have a Jekyll and Hyde White House.
Yes, yes, we do. But maybe it could not be otherwise, given that, as I said, the United States is on a journey of transition, and given how the US bureaucracy, the deep state, how fundamentally opposed it is to all of this change. If we had a straightforward White House trying to pursue these policies in the way that we want, the America First policies, I mean, there would be the crisis within the United States would be far greater than what we're seeing today, and I think that is something we need to bear in mind.
Commander Crossfire says, I saw a comment, can't wait to see Russians in Kiev. They're already there. The city's full of them. The government is run by them. Civil War 4, the soul of a nation. This is a struggle to save a civilization.
I think what you mean is that people in Kiev are reverting to talking Russian, which is absolutely true. I did an article, by the way, on our Substack site, which you can find, in which I made this very point. Apparently, there's been a mass abandonment across Ukraine of Ukrainian. People are just going back to using Russian again. And it's been pointed out that in the corruption scandal, all of these Ukrainian nationalists who are involved in the corruption scandal, Yermak and all of them, are talking Russian with each other. That's the language that they all use. They don't use Ukrainian. A few brave souls like Bezuglaya still speaking Ukrainian. Everyone else now is reverting to Russian. The teenagers in the schools are reverting to Russian. That might and will be important once the war is ended. But at the moment, you mustn't assume that because people in Kiev are talking Russian, that means that, they're suddenly gone over to the Russian side, or have straightforwardly gone over to the Russian side.
Peters 9744 says, as we all know, when we're out on the streets trying to persuade people that the war is a proxy US-EU job, all we get is abuse from so many captured minds. You gentlemen keep us going.
Well, there is some truth to this, but again, a couple of weeks ago, I was invited to give a talk in Oxford, and I went to talk to the group there, which is an interesting group made up of all kinds of people, and they were initially extremely hostile, and then as we went through the discussion, which lasted 2 hours, you could see the ground shift, because all kinds of things were being. I was explaining all kinds of things to them that they'd never heard. And by the time I pointed out to them that Keir Starmer has actually signed a treaty with Zelensky, which says that Ukraine is on an irreversible path towards NATO, I remember there was an absolute gasp from the audience and all appearance of shock. And of course, they don't know.
Yeah, the hockey goalie says 2000 M2 and Drivka demonstrates how far out of touch these politicians are if they think this is a valid negotiation strategy. It's over.
Yeah, I agree.
West Wolf says, Alex, you have said Ukraine is 100% subordinate to the U.S. The U.S. can suspend financial, military, and intelligence aid, but without direct U.S. intervention in Donbass, how can Ukraine troops be forced to leave?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, of course, if the United States switches off aid, then they're gone because the Russian army will drive them out.
They're gone.
I mean, they can't stay their positions.
Switch off the aid, switch off the Starlink, switch it all off.
Yes.
And that's it. Even Putin has said as much. Even Gerasimov has said as much. I mean,
yes.
If the U.S. switches off all of the intel, all of the satellites, all the Starlink, all of that stuff, then give it 2 weeks.
Yes,
and they'll be leaving. Yeah.
My own view about that, by the way, is really very simple. If the United States did that, and stuck with it and gave every impression of sticking to it. That is the one thing that might make people in Kiev change their minds and actually negotiate with the Russians some kind of deal where perhaps they would leave and the Russians would take over, but it would be done in a peaceful and orderly way. It's because they know that the United States will never do that, that the war continues.
Yeah. Matthew says, your last video on empire collapse was fantastic. The historic comparables are most insightful.
Yes, thank you.
That was a good video.
Yeah.
I like that video. Man for today, Doctaro, Putin's slow war is inhumane. Thoughts?
Yes, I mean, this has been very much Doctoro's views. I going to make one very simple observation here. He constantly blames one individual, Vladimir Putin, for the way in which the war is being conducted. But if we have learned anything from the recent interactions between Putin and the military, what we've learned is that it is the military itself that has decided on the strategy and the plan to conduct the war in the way that it is being conducted. In fact, Gerasimov and the others constantly talk now about the plan that has been drawn up by the general staff. So it is the military who are conducting this war. And the war is a war in which the Russians pursue aggressive attrition because they are aiming at complete victory, and aggressive attrition takes time. And maybe it is inhumane, but war is inhumane. There is no such thing as humane war.
Yeah. Samuel Moroni says, after 6 months, do we know something more about the attack in Fordo? Regarding the document, should Iran be less afraid of the U.S. in the Middle East?
We know very little indeed about the attack on Fordo because the Americans are saying that, of course, it was totally successful. The Iranians are playing a complex dance. Sometimes they say it's very successful. Other times they say that it wasn't. Sometimes they deny that they're doing more enrichment. Other times they say that they hint that they are. So we don't really know. And there's no IAEA on the ground in Iran to provide us with the information. So we don't really know very much about the effectiveness of these strikes because there's been no independent information provided and the Iranians themselves have not allowed inspections.
Danielle says Kuleba's girl pal has the moves of an Elaine Bennis. Yeah, Kuleba, yeah. Very true. Very true assessment.
Notice that he's not rushed off to the battlefronts as apparently he once said he would, nor has Yermak, nor have any of these people.
Yermak's going to get out.
Of course,
they're saying that Zelensky's not going to allow him to leave, but he's going to get out.
Of course, he is.
Yeah. Francis Bluebuff says, could either of you foresee Mr. Ventura as the next president of Portugal?
Well, I don't know enough to say. I mean, I'm not familiar with Portuguese politics. I don't know who Mr. Ventura is, by the way.
West Wolf says, I always had a lot of time for Doctaro, but his views on Russia the last 2 years are so tragically off base. It's ridiculous.
I think he spends, of course, he mostly lives, as I understand it, in Brussels. And I think his views have been very much shaped by the climate there. And it's not surprising, actually. I mean, if you go to Brussels, which I've been to many times, by the way, I mean, it is dominated by the bureaucracies, the NATO and EU bureaucracies, which have merged.
Kalin Kulinal says, will the EU realistically collapse? When? And wild guesses or estimates on timeline? I can hardly wait for this to happen.
It will eventually collapse. I think it's got some time to go before that happens. I would love it to happen soon because, of course, with every day and every week and every month and every year that it continues, Europe becomes weaker and weaker. The best part of this strategic review that the US has published is where it discusses the situation in Europe. And I have to say, I thought it was spot on.
And Europe has taken a huge hit with this fight with Musk, going after Musk and finding X. The EU has taken a huge hit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's now people openly talking about the bureaucracy, the unelected officials in the EU, the corruption in the EU. I mean, this didn't happen 2-3 years ago, and now
No.
everyone is openly talking about it, especially many
Yes.
people from the United States.
Yes.
So they've taken a huge hit.
Absolutely.
Rico, thank you for that super chat. Order out of peace. Thank you for that super sticker. Sanjeva says Turkish inflation is apparently over 50%, but economic growth rate 3.5%. Does economic growth mean anything when inflation is so high? Western mainstream media is praised for economic growth of Turkey, but condescending of Russia. Part two. So, what's more important, economic growth at the expense of inflation or controlling inflation? What's good for the people in the end?
It is very interesting because you're absolutely right. The two countries have taken completely diametrically opposing pathways. Erdogan has prioritized economic growth over everything and has let inflation surge. Putin prefers economic stability and prioritizes keeping inflation low. Now, my own personal view, there's no doubt at all which is the better approach. Stable macroeconomic conditions, which are the ones that Putin is prioritizing, ultimately, without any question, are the better way to go. You can argue that Putin and Nabulina are taking it too far. That they're worried about inflation not going above 4%, and 5% inflation is not going to make such a huge difference. But anyway, one has to nonetheless, I think, my own sense is that they're right nonetheless to prioritize inflation, to prioritize savings. And what you get in a low inflation system is that you eventually get savings start to grow. That leads to investment. That leads to more efficient production growth. That leads to higher quality production growth. That leads to better labor productivity. It also results in a better conditions of life. Whereas in Turkey, as I said, a lot of the growth, I'm sure, is in fact inflation.
Commander Crossfire says difference between the Vietnam War is Russia helped the third party. Now the U.S. sees Russians. Now the U.S. uses Russians against Russians. Mass loss of life. Still partners. Talk while you shoot me.
Well, I think that I think that is true. But I just made the point that a situation where the superpowers are involved in conflicts, but nonetheless talk to each other, is not in itself unprecedented. What is unprecedented, and here I think Putin can be faulted, is that the American superpower has conducted missile strikes and assisted in drone strikes on Russian territory it recognizes as Russian. And that never happened during the Cold War and would have been considered inconceivable. I mean, the Russians never assisted the North Vietnamese to carry out attacks within the continental United States. I mean, that possibility never existed and was never imagined by anyone.
Hello there says Russia is winning now, but with low birth rates and over 100,000 young men dead, has Russia actually lost in the long run and been weakened by the globalists?
No, I don't think so. First of all, demographic problems are absolutely real. By the way, Putin's just given a massive speech about this, and they're putting together programs to increase the birth rate and all of that. Russia's birth rate is low and falling, but in the West, our birth rates have now fallen to almost exactly the same level. So the Russians are no longer an outlier here as they used to be. And earlier in Putin's time, there was actually quite a significant increase in the birth rate. Then the pandemic came and it fell back again. And it's been a struggle to start pushing it up again. And by the way, in Hungary, it is exactly the same. The number of losses that the Russians have suffered are insignificant relative to the size of their population and will have no impact on the demography whatsoever. And again, if you look at the age balance of the Russian army, mostly they are men in their late 30s, because they're the people who volunteer. They're younger than the Ukrainians, about 15 years younger. But nonetheless, as I said, they're not the young men in their teens and 20s. And they're the people that you need to husband if you're going to achieve a higher birth rate later.
Harry C. Smith says France and Nigeria have been bombing Benin.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
Jolly Lollipop says, will the Duran visit Gaza when ISR opens it up for Western journalists? This is supposed to happen anytime now.
I can't imagine that.
As Israel opens it up for journalists.
Yes. I mean, I would point out something that, we're not people who, do that. I mean, we don't go into war zones. I mean, we talk to Patrick, who comes along, does programs with us. And of course, he's a war reporter. But that hasn't been up to now what we do. I mean, we are commentators. We listen to reports, we absorb reports, we talk to people who are there on the ground. But I mean, mostly we're commentators, and I can't imagine that we're going to be rushing off to Gaza in that kind of way. I don't know what we would achieve by doing that. There are other people who do that and do it well, and we are proud to say that we work with them.
West Wolf says the U.S. needs to find a way past the Ukraine goalkeeper and have open and honest dialogue with Budanov. Thoughts?
That is an excellent point and a very good one. And maybe they are. You see, I think Driscoll, who strikes me as a very clever man, probably has established some kind of dialogue with Budanov. Again, I suspect that there are an awful lot of people who don't want to talk to Budanov. I was listening, I remember a couple of months ago, to General Cavoli, one of these generals there, and he went to Congress and he said things that, it seemed to me utterly fantastic, that the Russian army is degrading, that the Ukrainian army is improving, that they're getting better. And I remember all these senators for Senate were, nodding and looking delighted as he was saying. And it was fantasies. I mean, Budanov never talks like that, in fairness. And I think Driscoll understands it.
Geo Stone says, thank you both for keeping us informed for 2025. Thank you, Geo Stone. Ruby Appel says the Russians will move into Odessa soon.
Well, I think they will, of course, soon.
Sure,
I mean, if they move in a year,
they
move there in a year, that was that soon, or is it, not soon? But anyway,
in the context of history, it's soon. Yeah,
it's soon. But this conflict still has some way to go.
Yeah,
I mean, 2026 will still be a year of war at the, and I mean, there might be some peace agreement beyond that, but I can't imagine everything coming together in before the end of 2026 at the earliest, at the earliest.
Geostone says, who's the biggest threat to world peace, the UK or the EU?
Oh, the UK can do only limited amounts of harm. Far and away, the biggest threats to peace are to be found in Washington amongst the neocons there. The neocons control the EU. The neocons control the UK. Be absolutely clear about that. As we discussed earlier in today's program, the 20-point plan that is coming out of London has been drawn up almost certainly by people in Washington.
BMido1387 says, glad you found your mic, Alex. Thank you for that. Sanjeva, part 1 of 2, India and Russia. Unanimous consensus in India when Putin visited India was that the relationship needs to be strengthened. Yeah. This was bipartisan, as Gandhi, the opposition head, was even angry he wasn't invited to greet Putin. Part 2 is, but nothing in India gets done in a hurry or by directive. India Army lacks modern rifles, and the purchase tender has been open for years. India, Russia, not lack of enthusiasm, but just reflects general lethargy in India.
I'm sure you're right about all of those things. By the way, the consensus about the fact that Indian-Russian relations need to be upgraded, that exists in Russia too. If you spend any time in Russia and you talk to people in Russia about India, I mean, they love India. I mean, it's perhaps the single biggest passion for a country that the Russians have. They absolutely love India, and their love for India goes way back to the 19th century. The first translation of the Rig Veda, the entire Rig Veda, into a European language was made in Russia. Just saying.
R.W. Swall says, while U.S. neocons are still very influential, oblivious to changing realities, Europe is courting a U.S. regime which is no longer there.
I agree. I think everything about what we are seeing, and this was, by the way, already true under the Biden administration, and it started with the Trump administration. Everything that we're seeing suggests to me that a seismic shift is indeed underway, that the United States reached its limits and is starting to recalibrate itself. These processes take time. And in the meantime, the neocons remain strong. But you're absolutely right. The Europeans struggle to understand the significance of the changes in the United States that are taking place. Politically speaking, and I have to say this, the US is streets ahead of Europe. The United States retains agency. It retains politics. In Europe, we don't have that anymore.
Game of Chairs says, when they make Ukraine the movie, will the Duran be brought in as consultants?
Well, we're here. If anybody wants, we're here.
Yeah. Hello there says, guys, I'm still waiting for the Russian history series. Question, why has Russia survived wars and crisis that destroyed other empires, and what keeps the state together?
Well, because it is a nation, and you talk about it as an empire, and the Russians sometimes also talk about their country as an empire, but it is an empire which is also a nation. Every citizen of Russia is a citizen of Russia. I mean, that there is no subject peoples inside it, and they all feel Russian. And of course, most of them are ethnic Russians. 80% of them are ethnic Russians. So it does have that degree of social cohesion. And of course, Russia prizes patriotism and all of the things that involve being Russian. Again, I've been watching Russian films of the Stalin era recently. I mean, because I'm interested in films. And I was struck again by how even during the Stalin era, there was still a sense that Russia is the place that is behind this. I noticed that during the films, for example, showing the Battle of Stalingrad, the soldiers in these films speak of themselves as Russians, not Soviet soldiers, which is interesting.
Zisi Karayanis, thank you for that super sticker. Matthew says, what happens by 2030 then? Europe marches into Ukraine?
Well, good question. No is the answer. Our militaries, I'm going to make a prediction in 2030, our militaries in Europe are going to be even weaker than they are now. All the trends are for the military to become weaker and weaker still. And if you're asking yourself why, look at the realities of European societies today. They are not such as to induce young men to want to serve, because what would they be fighting for? Now, there is plenty of patriotism, but the people who are patriotic within these societies, the European societies, their anger is not directed at Russia. It is directed against the political systems that rule over them. It's true in Britain. It's true in Europe. It's true in France. It's true in Germany. If people put up German or French or English flags, it's criticism of the governments in London, Paris, and Berlin.
Westwolf says, if I recall, a Prussian general once asked Lord Palmerston if there is such a thing as a humane war.
Absolutely. Good point. Good point.
1 second. From Itchna83, why do you not have Jackson Hickle and Scott Ritter? The goal is bigger than our egos.
Well, we don't. I mean, we have had Jackson. We've done programs with Jackson, and we did programs with Scott as well. Scott is in many places, if I may say, and we obviously listen to what he says. So we've not gone any kind of rule for and against him, but we do want to set out our own positions, and we look for guests that complement what we do, if I can put it like
It's
that.
time consuming to also get the guests. I mean, even the past couple of weeks, we've just been doing a show just us two,
Yes, exactly.
just because of time
Exactly.
constraints.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
bear in mind that what we do is different from what other channels do, in that we do 80% of what we do is us. We provide our commentary and our thinking and things of that kind. We are not just there to interview people, and that makes us different.
Yeah, but absolutely, it'd be great to have both Jackson and
Absolutely.
Scott on. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Fuzzyball says, how substantial a victory for Putin would reclaiming Odessa within the whole of Russia?
Oh, I mean, it would be a huge event. I mean, it would be. I mean, I don't think Putin, by the way, is particularly interested in securing his place in history, but it absolutely would. I mean, when it happens, because make no doubt about it, it will. He will be there amongst the great leaders of Russia, Peter the Great, Catherine the Great, all of those.
Trevor Watt says, why is Ukraine still holding Igor colonoscopy in prison? Igor Kolomoisky, I believe, but okay, I get it. Igor Kolomoisky. Why is Igor Kolomoisky in prison?
Rather good, actually.
That's because, yeah, Zelensky, the whole history, right?
Yeah, so Zelensky here, exactly. I mean, because of course he was originally launched by Kolomoisky, and of course he turned against his master and cut the strings because he was the puppet that wanted to go by himself. Kolomoisky made a massive mistake, by the way, there, just to say. And of course, the thing to always understand about Ukrainian politics, Kiev politics, is that ultimately they're always about money. And it was all about getting hold of Kolomoisky's assets and all of those kind of things. So ultimately, this is a battle over money and assets and all of those things.
Trevor, colonoscopy. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor, for that. That's a good one. All right. Good nickname there. Elza says, gentlemen, if you had the chance to ask Putin a question at the next end of the year conference, what would you ask him? Alex, don't forget to give an answer.
Oh, goodness.
What would you ask Putin?
Just Putin.
It's a hard one.
Very hard one, because there's so. I mean, what I would like to do with Putin, if I have to be honest, is I wouldn't want to ask him a single question. I'd like to have a long, nice chat with him and ask him about many things, including things that happened in the past. I suppose what I would ask him is this, though I probably already know the answer that he would give. I would ask him, do you really believe? Can you really imagine that there is any circumstance over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years where the relationship between Russia and Europe can be repaired? Because I don't see it. And I don't understand why there are still some people in Russia who talk as if it might happen.
Yeah. I would ask him if he actually believes the whole U.S. is a neutral mediator. Nonsense.
Well, that's another question.
Come on, Mr. President.
Yeah, but one can predict the answers to this.
Yeah, I mean, we know what he'll
he's
say.
Very good. He's very good at batting off these sort of questions.
Yeah. Saddam69 says, how long can the EU last without buying Russian energy? Are they retarded?
Well, I mean, they are in a hole, and they're digging they're digging deeper and digging themselves digging deeper and deeper, because they now say that there should be no imports of Russian oil and gas after 2027. Um, Bismarck once said that the one thing he would never do is play chess without putting his pieces on, being prepared to put his pieces on every square of the chessboard. In energy policy, the Europeans are doing the opposite. They are telling themselves, we will not put our pieces on 2/3 of the squares, and yet we still want to play chess. It's ridiculous.
Vassals. Sir Muggs Game says in 1987, La Cicciolina, the pawn actress,
Yeah, I
was
remember her.
elected to the Italian
I
was
remember.
elected to the Italian parliament, compared to Callis et al. She's Talleyrand.
Oh, she was. I remember her. I mean, she was just a clever person. I
I
mean,
think I remember who Sir Muggs Game is talking about. La
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
in
I mean,
Italy.
I mean,
I remember her.
she
Yeah,
had
I
more than
remember that.
she had more than
That
two
was
brain cells
that was
to run.
Berlusconi, wasn't it?
Absolutely,
That was the
that's
time
right.
of Berlusconi.
Exactly, it was. It was. It was when he emerged, first emerged in politics. But you know, I remember her well. I mean, Callas, let's face it, is in a completely different league to her. By the way, even the British are now saying that Callas is ridiculous. There's articles appearing in the British media that said that Callas is the gift to Putin that goes on giving.
Yeah, the EU is taking huge reputational hits.
Yeah.
They were once thought of this human rights, rule of law,
Yeah.
pristine European Union, liberal democracy, European Union.
Yeah.
That reputation has just been flushed down the golden toilet. It's
Well,
now all corruption and scandals and Ursula texts and Qatargate and this other scandal that has broken out with Federica Mogherini and Kaya Kallas, and now with Elon Musk and going after Twitter, going after X.
Yes,
it's not looking good at all for the image of the European Union. And of course, the support for Zelensky.
Absolutely.
Which never ends. Yeah.
Exactly.
Geostone says, end of 2026, where will Russia be on the front line?
Well, that I'm going to make a few predictions. They will be on the Dnieper. I mean, they might very well have taken Zaporozhye, perhaps Dnipro as well. And it could be that they go further, that they've gone further than that. It depends how comprehensively, whether the Ukrainian army has collapsed before. Bear in mind, if it collapses, then the Russian advance will quicken and potentially could become very fast. And if the Russians cross the Dnieper, then it's over. I mean, they cross.
If they reach the Dnieper, it's also over, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just.
Yeah.
I mean, you've explained it many times. The geographies of the conflict and the importance of the Dnieper for Ukraine. But I mean, if they even reach the Dnieper,
yes,
it's game over. Yeah.
It's game over. Yeah.
Westwolf says, could the energy issue lead to Hungary leaving the EU?
Possibly. At the moment, when we went there last year, they told us this is not on our agenda, but one day it might be.
I don't think any of the small countries are going to leave the EU. I'll speak for Greece or even Cyprus. They're never going to leave the EU, even as the people despise the EU. The attitude is more just let it crumble.
Yes.
Instead of trying to exit. I think that's the attitude of the people as well. Just let it crumble. We know it's going to crumble. Let it crumble, and we'll deal with it.
I think that's right. I think that's a good point, actually.
Sir Muggs Game says her election was supposed to be the worst thing ever. How wrong they were. War pawn is the worst.
I remember her. I mean, I never thought that it would be a crisis or a disaster, actually. As I said, she struck me as an intelligent person. I mean, she had her previous career, if I can put it like that, but there it was.
All right. Well, I think that's everything. We'll end it there on that note. Final thoughts, Alexander, before we
No,
wrap up, and we'll
we're
just do a
very
quick
interesting
check.
times. And to
Yeah.
repeat again, I mean, even if this document, the strategic review, is not implemented, I can't imagine it will be implemented. The very fact that there are now people who occupy positions of power in the United States who are thinking like this means that the debate about the United States and about its future has begun in earnest. And this has been penned by people like Colby, I'm guessing, and Driscoll, and they're not going to go away. So we are at the start of an end of empire moment. And say it again, when Britain's empire collapsed, Britain went into deep decline. If America's empire collapsed, America's a different society. It could be the moment of its, revival. But, a lot will depend on how this is navigated over the next 10, 20 years.
Geostone says, what does a collapse mean? A Ukraine collapse?
Yes. If you're talking about Ukraine, I mean a Ukraine collapse, a military collapse. If you want an example of how it works, go back to the US-American Civil War when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, and that sent that caused a cascade effect. It took about 6 months to work its way through, but then after that started, every single Confederate army eventually either surrendered or disbanded, one after the other.
Marika says, thanks for the live stream. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you.
Marika as well. And I think that is everything, Alexander. So thank you to everyone that joined us on this live stream, on Odyssey, on Rockfin, on Rumble, and YouTube, as well as the chat on Locals, the Duran.locals.com. Thank you to everyone that sent us the excellent questions for today. And thank you to our moderators, to Harry, who was moderating today. And I think it was just Harry, actually, that was moderating today's live stream. So thank you very much, Harry. And Alexander, we will call it a day for as far as live streams go. we'll call this video. One, and we got videos to
we're going to do
actually we got videos to record and then to publish. So we'll get back to work. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.